Okay, so let's start with the lecture for today. It's a recorded lecture, so you might have to bear with me for the glitches in the sound or whichever, but after that, we'll have a discussion. Okay, and we'll be recording both the lecture as well as the discussion together. Just let me know when you can start seeing the screen. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to start with the lecture. Okay, just stay put. Thanks. About the paradox of infinite growth. The lecture is divided into four parts. The first part will deal with ecological footprints and biocapacities. The second part will focus on ecological footprint accounting. The third part will touch upon ecological footprints and biocapacities of the nations in the world, including India. And finally, we will discuss the way forward. There is no planet B. Humanity's demand for goods and services created from our planet's resources have for a long time exceeded what the Earth's ecosystems are capable of renewing. The concept of ecological footprint is essentially a measure of the human demand on the Earth's ecosystems. Ecological footprint is the amount of biologically productive land and sea area that is necessary to supply the resources a human population consumes, and is required to assimilate and absorb the associated waste generated by the human activity in a given year. Hence, using this assessment, it is possible to estimate how much of the Earth or how many such planet Earths it would take to support humanity if everyone followed a similar lifestyle. In simple words, the ecological footprint measures how fast we consume resources and generate waste as compared to how fast nature can absorb our waste and generate new resources. It's important to note that ecological footprint is a measure of unsustainability and not of sustainability. Biocapacity is a measure of an area's biological productivity, including the ability of any ecosystem to provide useful ecosystem services to humans. This includes regeneration of biological materials and absorption of waste generated by humans. It's important to note that biocapacity is not fixed. It represents the availability of natural renewable resources and waste absorption services that can be used by humanity in a given year. This abundance and productivity of the natural capital can change each year. For example, natural disasters like forest fires, landslides, human induced degradation such as deforestation, soil loss, etc., can reduce the biocapacity of a region. Accounting the ecological footprint essentially is driven by one primary question: how much of the biosphere or any region's regenerative capacity does any human activity demand? Or, in simpler words, how much of the planet's regenerative capacity does a defined activity demand? This includes provisions for all the resources that the population consumes and absorption of all that population's waste using the prevailing technology and management practices. Accounts which you may have come across typically have two sides. For example, the banking financial statements have profit and loss, and they track both income and expenditure. Or there are balance sheets which document the assets and liabilities. Similarly, footprint accounts compare the availability of biocapacity, or simply put, the biocapacity of a region against the demand on that biocapacity, which is footprint. Once we apply this accounting logic in ecosystems and their ever so demanding human populations, we find that there are two types of bioregions: the ecological debtors and the ecological creditors. What are ecological debtors? If the demand on the biocapacity of a country, or simply put, its ecological footprint, exceeds its real biocapacity, then the country is termed to be an ecological debtor. It's quite possible that these countries could be harvesting resources unsustainably, like, for example, importing goods from abroad or even exporting their waste. Similarly, for ecological creditors, if the ecological footprint or the demand on the biocapacity of a country is way less than the biocapacity of its real ecology, then it's termed as an ecological creditor, or it's said to be having an ecological reserve. In a nutshell, ecological footprint accounting compares the actual amount of biological resources produced and the waste absorbed by the planet in a given year with the quantity of resources the humans extract and how much of waste is subsequently generated in that year. This accounting could be done for a single activity or a single individual to that of a city or a country or the entire world. Ecological footprints and biocapacity is measured in a specialized unit called global hectares. A hectare is equivalent to 10,000 square meters or 2.47 acres, which is roughly a square of 100 meters by 100 meters. Similarly, a global hectare is equal to 1 hectare of land or water with productivity equal to the average productivity of biologically productive hectares on Earth. Hence, one global hectare worth of any area is able to produce a similar amount of ecosystem services, irrespective of where it is located. It is a similar amount because different hectares across the world do not produce identical services. Hence, the need for averaging out the productivity and standardizing the average productivity. The ecological footprint demand types, or the global hectares affected by humans, are measured in the following six factors: the cropland footprint, which refers to all the biologically productive global hectares of land and water area which we need to grow our crops; the grazing footprint, the fishing ground footprint, the forest footprint, the carbon footprint, and the built up land footprint. Biological capacity, on the other hand, is measured in the following five factors: croplands, grazing areas, fishing grounds, forest lands, and built up land. It's imperative to note that two of the demand categories provided by one biocapacity category, forest products and carbon footprint, both compete for forest land or trees. In other words, the forest biocapacity serves two competing uses: absorbing carbon dioxide and providing forest products such as timber and firewood. Here's an interesting graph that shows us how many Earths does it take to support humanity. On the x-axis, we have the years, and on the y-axis is the footprint, which is expressed not in global hectares, but in the number of planets. It's interesting to note that before the 1970s, humanity's demand on the biocapacity was less than that of the Earth's biocapacity. It was only in the beginning of the 1970s that for the first time our human footprint exceeded the biocapacity of the Earth. According to calculations done by the Global Footprint Network, an international organization that researches on biocapacities and ecological footprints year after year, it is now in the first half of August every year that we go into an ecological debt for that very year, on a day which is known as the Earth Overshoot Day. In 2019, the Earth Overshoot Day was on the 29th of July. What exactly is the Earth Overshoot Day? Well, it is a date in a year when the humanity's demand for the ecological resources and services in that given year exceeds what the Earth can regenerate in that particular year. It's calculated using the following formula. The Earth's overshoot day is equal to the Earth's biocapacity divided by humanity's ecological footprint into 365. The first ecological deficit year that we've had in the history of humanity was in the 1970s. As you can see that in the 1970s, if the Earth's overshoot day was on December 28th of that year, it has advanced to be on the 29th of July in 2019, the earliest ever. This means that humanity's annual demand on nature exceeds what the Earth's ecosystem can regenerate in a year. That is, humanity is currently using nature 1.75 times faster than the planet's ecosystems put together can regenerate or assimilate, which is equivalent to 1.75 Earths. The COVID 19 crisis has definitely been devastating to humanity. But the crisis and the lockdowns imposed by the various countries around the world has caused humanity's ecological footprint to contract. Well, at least for this year, 2020. The 2020 overshoot day has moved back to August 22nd from the earlier July 29th in 2019, a 3 week shift primarily attributed to the multiple lockdowns. However, it's imperative to note that true sustainability that benefits all equally should only be achieved by equitable design and not via a disaster. Here's another thought provoking infographic put together by the Global Footprints Network. This shows when would the Earth overshoot day be if the entire world's population lived the lifestyle of a particular country. For example, if the world followed the lifestyle of people living in Qatar, we would be overshooting the biocapacity of the Earth by as early as 11th of February, less than a month and a few weeks into the said year. On the other hand, if the world's population lived like that of an average Indonesian, the Earth overshoot day would probably fall on the 18th of December. What's interesting is that most of the countries that consume more belong to the global north, while those in the global south lead relatively less exploitative lifestyles, even though there is tremendous conscious improvements needed in the way humanity consumes resources and generates waste if we have to be truly sustainable. Ecological footprints are determined by the lifestyles and consumption choices of human population. Here is an interesting infographic of the ecological footprints of the various countries in the world. The graphic shows how many times the area of the country, in terms of land, water area, and global hectares, are required to meet the demands of its own citizens. As you can see, Japan needs 7.7 times the country's size, while India, as we stand today, requires 2.7 times the area of India. And globally, we require 1.75 times the Earth to sustain our demands. This can be explained using the concept of ecological deficit. Ecological deficit occurs when the ecological footprint of a population exceeds the biocapacity of the area available to the population. This infographic shows the world's nations and its ecological deficits or ecological reserves. Essentially, it shows which all countries are biocapacity creditors and which all are biocapacity debtors. Now let's compare India's ecological deficit with two extreme examples. The island nation of Singapore, with its limited land area and extremely high dependence on its neighboring countries for its supplies for sustenance, along with Suriname, a nation which has one of the highest ecological reserves in the world. If we translate what we see in the graphs to mathematical terms, it essentially shows us that Singapore's ecological footprint exceeds its biocapacity, by 9,950%, while Suriname's biocapacity exceeds its ecological footprint by 2,750%. As a country of 1.3 billion people, India ranks third in the global countries in terms of the respective ecological footprints, calculated based on the demands of its population and the waste generated, which needs to be assimilated. However, if one looks at the ecological footprint per person index, India ranks a mere 158th amongst the other nations. Why is this so? To understand this, it's important to understand the concept of ecological footprint per person. The ecological footprint per person is a nation's total ecological footprint divided by the total population of the nation. Currently, the world's biocapacity is 1.7 global hectares per person, which means that the world can only sustain individual lifestyles that require 1.7 global hectares per year. The ecological footprint of an average Indian is 1.2 global hectares per person, which is well within the world's biocapacity, while that of an average resident of Qatar is 14.4 global hectares, which is 8.5 times that of the global biocapacity. In terms of biocapacity, India ranks fifth amongst the global nations, but we rank 166th among all the nations when one looks at the biocapacity per person index, scoring a abysmally low zero point 0.4 global hectares per person, mainly owing to the large population of our country. Life competes for biologically productive surfaces. The availability of such surfaces on land and water vary from one geographic region to another. For example, Suriname's biocapacity exceeds its ecological footprint by 2,750 percentage, while Singapore's ecological footprint exceeds its biocapacity by 9,950 percentage. Every country is unique and needs to have equal opportunities for progress and for providing for its citizens. But it's important to note that future pressures on biocapacity are increasing as the world's population continues to expand and the demands, misplaced lifestyle choices, and global climate driven resource constraints become more prominent and resource intensive. Of these, a few factors are beyond our control. There are many informed choices that one could make as a global citizen, as an architect, as an urbanist, to steer a future where the ecological footprints of us humans, as individuals, and collectively as humanity, could be consciously kept within the limits. Knowing well that the biocapacity of the one earth that we live in is limited. Hey, so that was the lecture. I hope all of you were able to listen to it carefully and see it.
Yeah,
Okay. So did you guys understand what was being spoken, or did you feel that it was too much to imbibe? It was simple, right?
Yes.
yeah,
Okay. So I think now if you want to kind of ask me questions or if you want to understand what this is about or if you have some observations, now is a great time for us to talk.
Sandeep, there are a few questions in the chat box a little above.
I'll just take them. Yeah. Just a second. Okay. Just give me a minute. Okay. At least you guys can see me now. Okay, Ishan Desai asks, Sandeep, there was one doubt. How much is the percentage of food that we consume in a city locally produced? Some people are saying that the amount of locally grown stuff that we get in the city is actually very less. I think that's causing discrepancies in the scores of people who travel via public and those who travel by private. Yes, absolutely, Ishan. There are two things that I think you're trying to say. One is the food that we eat also has a major role in kind of determining our ecological footprints. Like for example, if we eat from let's say a global chain every day, so the patty in there basically comes from a different country. It's preserved. It's it's kind of put into a cold storage, and then it travels all the way here. The potatoes that we have for French fries, they are grown somewhere in the Far East because those potatoes are the ones which are long enough to get the perfect fries. So they are preserved. So yes, all of it adds into the ecological footprint of those items. And if we consume them daily, which means our ecological footprints are far higher than someone who consumes something locally. Now, the problem with this is that in cities like Mumbai, we have limited land area or we have limited number of people whose occupation is based on growing food because it's much more lucrative to work in a factory or work in an office rather than grow your own food. But still, Mumbai as a city, when you compare it with many other mega cities in the world, still has a certain proportion of food that's still grown within the city limit. Just a second, just give me a minute. Hey, can you guys hear me and see me?
We can hear you, we can't see you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can't see you.
Okay,
We can hear you.
now? Okay. Okay, so Mumbai still has, like, if you travel by train, you would see that, on the sides of the railway tracks, food is being grown. Like you have leafy vegetables which are being grown. So, I mean, that's locally produced food. Or if there are housing societies, so rather than having large gardens, which are just beautiful to look at, it may be a great thing to have productive gardens, or we have terraces. Now with COVID, we've suddenly understood the power of, having terraces in buildings, right? People do exercise on their rooftops, they go for a walk in the evening and all of that. But it's always a great idea to actually convert those terraces into, productive food producing community gardens. It's possible. It's successfully done in many projects in the West, and there are housing societies in Singapore who actually do this. So, as a landscape architect, when I have also done projects wherein we proposed this idea of a community garden on the terrace where people could come in and interact and all of it. And during those days, the clients would say, "What is the point? Who would do it? Nobody would." But with COVID kind of changing our perspectives towards the way we live, I think there is a renewed interest in understanding landscapes through those. So definitely, Ishan, that's a great point. But having said that, it's all of us who have to kind of get together and start this initiative. So in your first year, when we got you to kind of get your hands dirty and plant those plants and those vegetables, it was like just pushing you gently to kind of understand that food can be produced, the joy of producing your own food and also consuming them locally. But at the city scale, it needs policy decisions. It needs far more larger changes to happen. But it's still happening in Mumbai. There are vegetables, especially green leafy vegetables or seasonal vegetables, which are grown within Mumbai. But land is always a problem in cities like Mumbai. Dia says, I think we're also ignoring the amount of packaged food we eat on a daily basis, which are rarely sourced locally. Absolutely, Dia. That's also one another concern. So if you eat local, if you have, I mean, there's a very interesting study which says that if the world was to follow the diet of an average American, like like a beef patty burger with French fries and all of that, uh, the ecological footprint of our entire world would kind of overshoot all almost all the planetary boundaries, all the limits, as opposed to, let's say, somebody who has an Asian diet, like a far Asian diet, like a little bit of carbohydrates with some protein. It's usually plant based, and and that's it. So rice requires a lot of water to cultivate. But having said that, there are some areas in India where rice is a staple, like Konkan, Goa, Kerala, Jammu and Kashmir. All those areas, rice is basically eaten as a staple. And there's a reason why it is eaten as a staple, because there's a lot of water availability there. There is monsoon. There are lots of areas which are actually submerged, underwater. But if we take that rice as a standard for the whole of India, again there are problems. So there are cultures that eat wheat. There are cultures that eat rice. There are cultures that eat other grains like millets. And I don't know if any of you are from UP or Bihar or any of those areas, but there are lots of recipes which are basically based on these whole grains, these millets, the old world, like bajra, jowar, and all of it. So, and even in Maharashtra, even in interior Maharashtra, a lot of dishes are actually based on it, like bhakris and all of it. So, I think that's also something that you should be looking at. Shreyan says the ideal number of Earths should be less than one, right? Because there are other living organisms too. Absolutely, Shreyansh, that's true. But even if so when we calculate ecological footprints, or when we calculate biocapacities, we calculate biocapacity in a way wherein we are only looking at the ecosystem services to cater to us humans, which is why biocapacity of 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 whatever, like whichever is the biocapacity of a country, we say that the ecological footprint of that country has to be lower than that. But yes, if you look at the whole of the Earth, there is only one Earth that we have. So ideally, our ecological footprint should be as low as is possible. It's not even less than one. Actually, it should be as minimalistic as possible. So in your class, you should actually check who of you has the least ecological footprint and probably take a cue from him or her. So Sandeep, can you send the PPT to CRs? Okay, yeah, that we've sorted. It's a very heavy PPT, but now you have the recording and you can keep playing it. I think the vegetables are KU says the vegetables are local, and the minimum limit they have specified is 320 kilometers, which reaches Gujarat to the north and Ratnagiri to the south. Acha, who specified this 320 kilometers? KU.
Website.
It's on the ecological footprint website.
Okay, fine. The ecological footprint calculator. Okay, sure. Yeah, so which is fine. In that case, you guys are actually consuming local vegetables, unless you are having a lot of, you know, uh, bell peppers or Brussels sprouts, or like nature's basket mein jo milta hai na, the exotic cheese and all of that. Of course, all of those are imported. Or if you're having basa, or like carp, or any of those exotic fish, then yes, it's imported from a different country. It's brought in. But if you buy from a local, bhandar, or a, like a sahakari bhandar or a local vendor, most of those vegetables will be from within the 320-kilometer radius. Yeah, but yes, I do understand in that case. And Sandeep, you may ask, Sandeep, then we shouldn't be having apples, because apples are definitely not made here. You shouldn't be having tea, because tea doesn't grow in a 320 kilometer radius of Mumbai. It either comes from Darjeeling, Assam, or Kerala, or any of those tea gardens that we have. It's okay. It's okay to actually have them. I mean, I'm not saying completely cut them off, but there are ways of reducing those consumptions. There are ways of reducing some areas which you can make a change for. Parth hasn't shared a good YouTube link for how humans are making pandemics. It's great. I mean, you guys should definitely catch it after the class, not during the class. And then a lot of emojis when I was getting connected. Okay. Then Shreyansh asked, can you explain the concept of global hectares? And what do you mean by global ecological debtors and creditors? Definitely. So we have to calculate ecological footprints and biocapacities in some unit, right? Now that unit cannot be just a physical measure in terms of area. You'll ask me why. Why? Because the very definition of ecological footprints or biocapacities is that it is that amount of area, that area that is required, or that amount of land or water surface that is required to produce what is the raw materials for what we need, or to assimilate the waste that we take within that particular year, right? So there is an element of time also in it, which is why it just can't be a hectare. It has to be area with respect to time, which is linked to a year. So that is why this common unit of global hectares were proposed. One reason. Second is, not every hectare of land or water on the Earth's surface will have the same biological productivity. You know, like a rainforest would be much more productive than, let's say, a barren landscape on the edges of Rajasthan. So if you have to compare a whole country or global hectares of a whole city, then what you do is you individually calculate um, the productivity of, let's just take Mumbai as an example. Okay, we're looking at the ecological footprint of Mumbai. Oh, sorry, the biocapacity of Mumbai. So in order to calculate biocapacity of Mumbai, we first take Sanjay Gandhi National Park area and all the forested areas in the city. We calculate the individual productivity for that area divided by the number of hectares and say, okay, the average biological productivity of those rainforests are so, or those forests are so much. Sorry, the forests are so much. Then you look at all the green areas which are there. Then you look at all the paved areas which are there. So you basically link them up, make a sum total of it, and then you divide it by the total area of Mumbai, land and sea area of Mumbai. So you calculate of the sea as well. कितना fish production होता है. कितना area sea, कितना nitrogen absorb कर लेता है, कितना carbon absorb करता है. We do all of that. Cumulatively, we add it up, then we divide it and we average it out. So so that is why ecological footprints are calculated in global hectares of area, but it doesn't mean so. It's an average. That's why in the lecture, if you can hear it once again, you'll know that there was a particular portion where I said that it's an average. It's basically averaged out. Okay, so individually, so if you talk of India, you calculate everything individually for the biocapacities, and then you will average it out by the entire global hectare. So that in terms of biocapacity, every square of global hectare will have an averaged productivity. What do you mean by ecological debtors and creditors? Okay, so those countries or those regions or those cities which have a larger ecological footprint. So ecological footprint is a measure of us humans, of what we consume. It's not a measure of the city. Right. Mumbai, if I have to talk of ecological footprint, I'm basically talking of the ecological footprint of the total population of the people who live in Mumbai. As opposed to if I talk of the biocapacity, I'm talking of the actual raw materials or the actual waste consumption capacity of the land area and the water area that comes under Mumbai. Got it. Now, so ideally, if it has to be balanced, ecological footprint and biocapacity has to be balanced within. So, I mean, if that is the case, then it's a balanced ecosystem. But what happens is, in most cases, like in Mumbai for sure, we consume more and we produce more waste than what the land area or the sea area of Mumbai can give us or assimilate. In that case, Mumbai is an ecological debtor. Just like in a bank, when you take a debt, you are borrowing, right? So just like that in Mumbai, we are borrowing. So India as well, and India is actually an ecological debtor. It's not an ecological creditor. Why? Let's look at a country like Suriname, wherein their ecological footprint is so low, but that land is biologically so rich that there is a huge biocapacity. So wahan pe they are ecological creditors because their biocapacities are low, but their ecological footprints are low, their biocapacities are very large. So they're ecological creditors. They're basically giving back. Okay, and Bhutan, yeah, exactly. Countries like Bhutan, countries like Suriname, there are many countries which are ecological creditors, while there are many countries which are ecological debtors. I hope I made sense, Risha. Mohit, can you also explain the area that a country requires to satisfy its people's needs? Like, what does that imply? Okay, so basically the area within a country and its water, its international waters and its water area remains limited. Okay, so but when you say the area that's required to satisfy all the people's need, it basically means that the ecological footprint of that population has to be lower than the biocapacity. So if let's say the ecological footprint is way higher than the biocapacity, then that means the country does not have enough area or enough land or water area to sustain its lifestyle or the lifestyle of its individuals. So basically, one needs to kind of cut down on the ecological footprint because the area remains constant. The biological productivity may change. Biological productivity may change, like with respect to climate, with respect to other reasons. Um, is FSI dependent on global hectares? Absolutely not. Very good, very good observation. So if you that's one thing that that's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, because when we talk of all the economic terms or all the developmental terms, like when we talk of GDP of a country, when we talk of FSIs, for building, for development, we completely take it out, we completely detach it from the environment, we completely detach it from ecology. We only talk of the land area, we talk of absolutes. And that is a very old understanding, that's a very naive understanding. So to answer you in short, Shreyansh, FSI is not dependent on global hectares, but I wish it was, because it would have created a sea of a difference. Mohit asks, ecological footprint also depends on the human population of that region. Exactly. Ecological footprint basically only depends on the human population. Right. It does not. So if you Google ecological footprint, look at the images, you will find green footprints, lots of, plants and animals shown within an icon of a footprint. But that is why I made it a point to mention in the lecture that ecological footprint is a measure of unsustainability. It's not a measure of sustainability. So if you have a larger ecological footprint, that basically means you're leading an unsustainable life. There is something somewhere that you need to change. Does these creditors supply resources to debtors, or is it just based on ecological footprint? Okay. So ecological creditors definitely do supply resources to debtors. That is exactly how the world has been able to live. Nahi to how can a debtor even sustain? Right. How is Singapore sustaining? Singapore is sustaining because it gets sand from Malaysia to ensure its beaches are not getting eroded. All its vegetables, its mangoes come from India. Its milk products basically come from New Zealand. So New Zealand dairies produce food which is for China is a major producer for consumption of food in Singapore. India sends a lot of stuff from India, and a lot of our exports basically sustain Singapore. So yes, in today's world, so just like landscapes, just like ecology, our economies are also so interconnected. Our food habits are so interconnected that that's how the world works. So you're absolutely right, Risha, when you say that that yes, that's how ecological debtors are able to sustain. नहीं तो they would have perished. ना अगर कहीं और से सामान नहीं आ रहा हो और वो produce ही नहीं कर रहे थे, तो how would they even perish and go strong? So like all these countries which have great imports, which import a lot of food items from outside or materials from outside, they are the ones basically become ecological debtors. Like UK, for example, like if Alfonso mangoes, even before they come to our markets, they basically go to UK and US and all these countries. Yeah. So any other? Is it clear or is it confusing for you guys?
It's clear.
It's clear? Okay. So I hope it was an eye-opening session and that you guys would work on your ecological footprints, or at least try to kind of just think about it. Even if you think about it and even if you start making those changes, I think it'll still be useful to kind of understand or make a change. There are some things which are beyond our control. Like, for example, we live in a city like Mumbai, and if we have to travel long distances because of the fact that we live somewhere and we work somewhere, it's there. It's some things are given, but then the mode of choice of travel is something that we can really work. Do you really have to have 4 cars in a house, of of a household of 4 people, or can you reduce on the number of cars that you actually have? Do you really have to take out your bike to kind of go out and buy something, or can you just bicycle down to a local shop and buy it, or can you just walk down? These are all decisions that that one can easily make. Like, do I have to take an air conditioned Uber really, or is there any other way of me traveling to office? So to college, so there are all these choices that one can make. And so there are conscious decisions, like, do you have to consume a certain kind of food which we know is ecologically not sustainable every day of our lives, or can we just reduce it to just 2 days of a week, and then eventually just reduce it to one day of a month or whatever? Can we move to a food cycle which is more sustainable, like like there are vegetables that you find or fruits that you find which are seasonal in nature? So why always consume apple? I understand apple comes all throughout the year, but apple is one fruit that has been modified, genetically so highly that you find apple flowering and producing fruits throughout the year, and it's heavily human controlled. If you get a chance, do read about it. If I can send you the links, I will definitely do that through the CRs. That there are stories in which there are research articles in which you'd find these beautiful stories of how apple has kind of the history of man and the history of apple. Apple is one fruit which everybody has it, and that's because it's lucrative to grow. It has a large shelf life, so these are the reasons which kind of determine which fruit gets available in the market as opposed to which fruit that doesn't. Like, for example, kokum, for example, kokum is a fruit which is rich in nutrients, but then you only get it for a certain time of the year. And it's easy to preserve kokum, so you basically dry it up. And I'm sure, most of you are from Maharashtra or Konkan area, or, you would know that, kokum is used heavily in dishes. But what is happening now? We have artificially manufactured kokum syrups that kind of taste like kokum, which is used for most of the dishes. Like in a large marriage or a large function, if sol kadhi is served, I really doubt if they really use real coconut syrup, or if they use artificially manufactured one, or the one where chemicals are added. So we need to kind of make these decisions. There are lots of other fruits which you may not know of, but try and find out when you go to your native place, or or when you talk to your grandparents. There are many other dietary things which would happen, which is why like last class also I spoke about undio. Like undio, I find it very unique because it uses seasonal vegetables and it's only made during a certain time of a year, which basically means that there are some of these old traditions, local food, which are basically consumed. So try and make these conscious lifestyle decisions. Dia says, I find it shocking there are individual footprints range from 2 to 3, but the global average is 1.7, including mine and industries. Yes, absolutely, Dia. It's shocking. I mean, it was shocking for me as well. I mean, I try to keep my ecological footprint low, but then because my family stays in different parts of India and the world, so I keep traveling to kind of go and meet them in between, and that shoots up my ecological footprint like crazy. So it's shocking, and I think we all need to make conscious decisions. So even in the way you design, even in the way even in the way that you kind of put up your landscapes together, you kind of imagine site planning in a certain site. It's for you to decide, that do you really want to kind of import a certain aluminium cladding from Malaysia or from the US, or do you want to kind of import your fittings from Italy, or do you want to kind of use good fittings which are sturdy, which are locally available? What kind of planting materials would you use? Just because some plant is beautiful and that gives a lot of flower, would you want to import it all the way from Andhra Pradesh, or would you rather do some research on understanding which are the local plants which are available in that particular region? If you're designing something, let's say Lonavala, it's great to understand what are the plants in Lonavala, what are the local building materials which are there, and then build with them. Of course, certain things can be imported, but then make sure that so with every material that comes from a certain place, or every designer who flies in from a foreign country to kind of assist you in the design, understand the ecological footprint of that project is increasing. So try and kind of reduce it. I'm not saying go local completely. You don't have to go on an activist mode. Maybe we should, but then slow changes, slow incremental changes, one by one. Like one flower at a time. You kind of think about it, and one day at a time, and then you kind of make changes. Okay, so it's 1:30, and I think if you want to kind of end the class, if you have another class after this, we can do it. Or if you have anything to ask me, please do ask. I'll stop the recording right now. because otherwise it'll be a very long recording and it'll be too boring for anybody who chips in at a later time to kind of maintain the interest and look at it.